But these guys are pushing the limits, and I just hope, hope they know there's heavy consequences to pay.
So today, you're the managing director of a New Earth project at Atlantic Packaging.
Yes.
But I want to go back to the beginning and find your roots in storytelling.
Okay.
What brought you towards this? And I know you have a long career, so this
Yeah, you don't want to know the whole thing.
we'll meander a little because it's fun. But I want to know, like, when did storytelling become a part of your life in a way that you wanted to pursue it as a career?
When did storytelling become something that I wanted to pursue? I started life as a sales guy, and I had some amazing mentors in sales and some people who oriented me toward what you really need to do is understand what your customer is trying to do and have empathy for their objective. And if you can come to the table with a solution using whatever it is, like, don't go to them trying to sell them what you need to sell them. Why don't you sell them what they want to buy? And I think inherent in that is telling the story of what you are bringing to the table is going to work for them. I think there was some real, when I look back, and God, that was 45 years ago. When I look back on that, I think, there was some real storytelling in that, developing those solutions. And then I've been very fortunate in that I've had the opportunity to do things that were relatively new in my career within large organizations, small organizations. And you had to tell a story to your leadership at the time too, to convince them to let you go do stuff. So there was storytelling inherent in all of that. So I would say, if I look back on it now and say that was storytelling, it was just kind of in a different cover. But it's been in the last probably 5 years. And how I came to a New Earth project was a real sort of around the corner kind of thing. It has been in the last 5 years that story and telling the stories of the people and the brands that are helping to accelerate the transitions that we're looking to help facilitate has really taken hold.
From sales,
Yeah.
what was the meander? Like, what was, I know you said you did a lot of things in a lot of big and small organizations.
Yeah.
So, I imagine it's varied, but if you look at it, is there a common thread that took you through your career to what brought you to Atlantic Packaging?
I wish there was some grand theory. There wasn't. I fell in love with media when I found out that you could sell television advertising as a career. Well, my best friend's uncle was in that business, and he explained what he did. And I said, I want to do that. That sounds fun. I thought I wanted to work in the advertising agency business. And then my buddy's uncle said to me, so at the time, got to remember, this was when the agencies got 15% commission when they bought the media. And he said, you want to be on the side that gets the 85% or the side that gets 15%? And I'm like, I think I'll be on the side that gets the 85%. That sounds better. And so that's how I got into ad sales, actually. And so the meander goes ad sales at a regional sports network in Los Angeles called Prime Ticket. We didn't have any baseball in the summertime because at the time the team owners thought we had the Lakers and the Clippers and the Kings and USC and UCLA, like a regional sports network.
Yeah.
Had them in Canada. And
Yeah.
they're all over the place. Back when cable was a really good business to be in, if you think about it. And we didn't have any baseball in the summer. And so we were fortunate in that we had been connected with the guys that did the Bud Surf Tour and the AVP Pro Beach Volleyball Tour. And so we were producing those for the rest of those regional sports networks as well. And along comes Gulf War I, 1991, and the bottom falls out of the ad market, and we lose all of our budgets to produce those events. We had an obligation to the cable operators to put on X number of hours of new programming every month. And so we had to do that. But we're in danger now of losing the ability to do that. And so I went to work for the head of programming, a guy who I had become very close friends with, that we would go surfing together. And he said, you want to come work for me? And if you can find sponsors to underwrite the cost of producing the events, we can keep them on the air. We don't need to make any money. We just got to find budget to produce them.
Yeah.
And so that was when I got my first taste of sponsorship development. I remember walking into his office one day. Maury Boogie Boards. Remember Maury Boogie Boards?
No.
Did you ever get?
No.
You know what a bodyboard is?
I know what a bodyboard is. Yeah,
So
but
the guy that created that was this guy Tom Maury, and I got them to sign up to be a sponsor, but they didn't have a TV spot. So I walked into his office. I said, "Hey, these guys need a TV spot. How much does it cost to make a commercial?" And he looked at me. He goes, "How much do you have?" And I didn't understand what he meant. And he said, "We can spend as much. You got $5? We'll do it for $5. You got 500,000. We can spend 500,000." I had no idea what that was funny. And so I got a chance to do that. And then shortly thereafter, realized that owning the events would be potentially a lot more lucrative than just producing the television for the events. And so I was lucky enough to get the green light from my leadership to we purchased the Bud Surf Tour from the guys that owned it. We owned that. And then I started an event called the US Open of Surfing, which still to this day is the largest surf event in the world.
amazing.
Yeah, started working on that in 1992, and then we debuted that event in 94, and I ran it for 3 years. And so that was one of those be careful what you ask for kind. I still can't believe they let me do it. I was 35 years old, and it was a multi-day festival at the beach. I remember on the last day, in 96, which was my last year running it, Kelly Slater had finally won the event. It was a beautiful sunny day. There's 20,000 people at the beach. We've got the Wallflowers playing on the Coca-Cola music stage with the Sony Jumbotron for free. It's all happening, and it's like, I don't know if I can do any better than this. It's sort of like I peaked at that moment. But the event continues, actually. It's owned by IMG today, and it continues to be probably the largest beach festival in the world. So then I had this sports marketing background, event background, production background. And so I was really fortunate in that regard. And then I went to work for Sony Pictures in our international television group. And at the time, Sony had and still to this day has a remarkable library of content. Seinfeld, I mean, you name it.
Yeah.
And so our corporate development guys at the time were very smart, though this new exploding cable and satellite world internationally, all those folks wanted to license that content from Sony, and they said, we'd be more than happy to license you the content as long as we can get a slot for our new channels. And so I was part of that team that launched that portfolio of channels around the world. AXN, the Action and Adventure Channel, Animax, Sony Entertainment Television, Super TV in Taiwan. It was a pretty cool listen. Those channels continue to exist today. And that was a fascinating experience to be able to get out into the world and see how all the rest of it worked. Then I came back, took a quick spin through the internet. I ended up, I was going to tell you this, when I said that I had been very fortunate in my career to get to do some things early.
Yeah.
I read Nicholas Negroponte's book, Being Digital, at the end of 1994 after the first US Open. And I thought, oh boy, here it comes. This is going to change the world. So I bought 10 copies of the book and gave them to my 10 closest people in business. Said, you guys got to read this. It's going to happen. And I built a website for the US Open in 95. And this is before there were any ad standards. I mean, that it was early days, but it really was a foundational thing for me and how things evolved over time. So I ended up taking a spin through the internet. I worked at iFilm, which was short films on the internet. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
And we ran into 2001. So that happened.
Yeah, the bubble.
Yeah. And then I went to work for Prime Media, which was a KKR portfolio company. And I ran a portfolio of magazines that included surfer and surfing and snowboarder and skateboarder called the Action Sports Group. And it was really cool because it's a world that I grew up surfing. I love it. And if you had to ask me to identify myself, I'm a father, a husband, and a surfer in that order. And so it was really back to my roots in many ways. And I had this great run in the media business. So it was really fun for me to be able to come back in, and it was a multi-platform play. So that was until 2006, and I went to work at Tribune Company and ultimately ended up as chief digital officer for Tribune. And that was an interesting time too, I think. From almost the day I started, we were in bankruptcy as an organization. That's when Sam Zell and that group of folks came along and thought they could reinvent the local news business. And unfortunately, they just ran into the same headwinds that everybody else ran into.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting time and a really interesting formative set of experiences to navigate 23 local television stations, 9 daily newspapers, including the LA Times and the Chicago Tribune and the Baltimore Sun, and a whole bunch of events and websites and the whole deal. And, unfortunately, as we have seen, none of those legacy media brands, with maybe the exception of the New York Times, have really figured out a transition. Like none of them, really.
Yeah.
And I don't know that King Kong could have done it. It was just one of those things. How do you future-proof yourself against Craigslist with your classified ad revenue?
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when I was working local television in Los Angeles in the 80s, we would marvel at the LA Times. They outbilled all the electronic media, television stations and radio stations in Los Angeles combined. It was it was remarkable. And they don't anymore. So did that. I took a couple of years off, and then I helped a buddy of mine with a startup that he did, which was, this is going to sound nuts, but a video-centric digital asset management solution.
Okay.
So helping companies, it was originally it was a custom dev shop out of Denver, and they had done some work for Comcast Media Center out there.
Yep.
And they had done some work for UFC and for NASCAR. And so think about UFC and NASCAR, asset management was a huge thing for those guys.
Well, the amount of stuff they create.
Oh my God. And
Yeah.
how and versioning it all. And so these guys had done this custom dev work, and one of the guys on that team was called Levels Beyond. One of the guys on that team said, we could productize this. Everybody needs this. Every enterprise video creator in the world needs this. And my buddy called me, he goes, "What are you doing right now?" I said, "I'm thinking about going back to work." He goes, "Can you come help me with this? I think you'll find it really interesting." And so I did. And ultimately, it's the $0 billion business out there, because it's still, and I think AI is going to change everything. Actually, it's going to make it work finally. But the challenge we ran into was delivery, being able to being able to productize a delivery vehicle for the content once it's created. But the other problem was just the infrastructure of all these big enterprises. Everybody was a snowflake.
Yeah. And
then I found myself so out of my depth talking to the CTO at ABC News, and we're having a debate between fiber and gig. And I'm like, I've stopped being useful at this point. I don't know what I'm talking about, so I better go do something else. And then in 2016, I was part of a team that created a new network services business. Got to think about 2016. We thought it was all going to be OTT apps, is what we thought it was going to be. You had Amazon Fire, you had Roku, you had the Apple App Store, and I teamed up with a guy, really accomplished guy named Andy Schoen, who had been head of programming at MTV, a network architect, really a guy that knew how to build brands. And I joined as chief operating officer, and we found somebody that backed us financially, and we were intent on building a new network services business.
Oh, cool.
Unfortunately, we were not able to raise the money that we needed to raise, but we did acquire Fuel TV along the way. And I don't know if you remember Fuel, the action sports channel.
Yeah.
It had been launched by the Fox Networks group back in 2003. They had taken Fuel off the air in the US in 2013.
Okay.
At the time that they took off Speedvision and the soccer channel, and they wanted to go head up against ESPN. So they converted Speedvision to Fox Sports 1, that distribution. They converted the Fuel TV distribution to Fox Sports 2, and the soccer channel to Fox Sports in Spanish, Fox Sports Deportes. And so Fuel comes off the air in the US. But the guy that had acquired the international license. Fernando Figueiredo out of Lisbon kept it on the air. And then in 2014, he acquired the brand, all the assets, the library, the logo, all of the IP for Fuel from Fox Networks Group. And then we acquired Fuel in 2016 because our financial sponsor said, I believe in your vision, but why don't you guys go acquire something and run it and prove that it will work? And so we acquired Fuel. And like I said, we did not ultimately raise the money. And so we ended up handing the asset back to Fernando, and he asked me to stay on the board and help him, which I did. So I was doing that. Plus I had a couple of other things that I was working on. And then about 4 years ago, I had partnered up with a guy by the name of Chris Morrow, who had been the editor at Surfer Magazine when I was running that group. And he had said, do you want to partner up with me and EP on the definitive history of surfing? We're going to do the Ken Burns version of the history of surfing. I'm like, sign me up. This is COVID time. So we're all kind of at home trying to figure out what we were going to do. And so anyway, I did sign up for that one and started working on it. And about a year later, Chris called me. We weren't making any progress. Like we couldn't figure it out. We couldn't raise any money. We were all kind of stuck.
Yeah.
I'm still doing the Fuel thing. And he called me and he said, hey, our good friend PK, actually the filmmaker behind Pipeline, which we're going to premiere or we're going to screen it here on Wednesday night. PK found some financing for the film. Would you mind stepping off? He's going to step on. And I said, not at all. I love PK. I want to see the film get made, but can we get it for Fuel TV? And he said, I think so, but thank you. And that was it. So off they go and off I go. And then I would say it was probably a couple months later, I ended up getting a call to go have coffee with this guy, mutual friend, this guy, Darren. And we meet up for coffee. And it's one of those meetings where you just kind of file it away. Nice guy, really smart. He gets it. But there was not an immediate opportunity for us to work together. And so off we go. He was interested in Fuel and, how did it work? And were we buying any content? And we weren't at the time. So filed it away. And then I think it was a few weeks later, I called Chris. I said, how you doing on the film? And who's backing this thing? Like, what's the deal? And he goes, oh man, I don't know if I can talk about it. You need to talk to this guy, Darren. And I asked him, Darren who? And he told me, I said, geez, I just had coffee with that guy. What are the chances of that? Like, that is so wild.
Yeah.
So I had his number and I called him and I said, hey, I don't mean to be nosy, but like, you're working on this with Chris and PK? And he said, yeah, I am. That's my client, Wes Carter at Atlantic Packaging. I'm like, Atlantic Packaging? What is a packaging? I don't know anything about packaging.
Yeah.
And I said, what is a packaging company doing, getting into producing films? He said, well, I have been working with one of their sales guys and to help make him famous on LinkedIn. And, it's been going pretty well. And I met Wes. He called me and asked me how I did what I do, or how I do what I do. And I met with him and I told him that I thought that the direction that Atlantic should go in would be to focus on sustainability as one of the principles of Atlantic Packaging. And it turns out that PK is very close with John Pizell, who shapes John Florence's surfboards, and they want to reimagine a surfboard shipping system to eliminate single-use plastic. And so we're working on that, and we think we're going to be able to use Chris's film as a vehicle to tell that story. I'm like, oh, okay. It's still not computing at this point for me. I'm like, all right, well, that sounds like a theory, I guess. Okay. And he said, and by the way, so Wes Carter is the president of the company, and it's a family-owned business, and he's going to be here in a couple of weeks, and he wants to know about the media business, and about the media business. Would you like to meet? And I thought, yeah, sure, that sounds, I guess, why not? So I did my research. Is this too much?
No.
Okay.
This is great.
So I did my research, and and so it's Atlantic Packaging. And like I said, I don't know anything about packaging. And find out that it was founded in 1946 in a little town. So I know the story a lot better now, but I found out that it was founded in 1946 in Tabor City, North Carolina. and that the founder, Horace Carter, had started it as a weekly newspaper, had taken on the Ku Klux Klan, and ultimately prevailed. And it's a better story than that, and had won the Pulitzer Prize. I'm like, okay. And then I started thinking about, why would a guy be making investments in surf movies, which is never been a terribly commercial thing to do. And I thought, well, these dudes that run these big billion-dollar privately held companies, they love stable, projectable markets. Maybe he's doing it because he wants to have a market to sell into in 10 years. I don't know, but I'm going to go meet the guy. I was, a little skeptical, of course. You don't know what you're going to meet.
Yeah.
Moment I met him, instant like, oh, okay. And I sat with him, and we're sitting outdoors in Newport Beach at the Marriott up there, and we're having this conversation. And mind you, like I said, I didn't know anything about packaging, but I had just gotten a new surfboard the week before that had come in bubble wrap and plastic tape, and I didn't know what to do with it all. I didn't know if you recycled it. I didn't know if you threw it in the trash. Had no clue. So I'm sitting there with him, and I'm talking to him, and I'm listening to what they're doing and what his theory of the case. And I found myself nodding. And I said, hey, so I think maybe I understand now why you're doing this. You're doing this because your grandfather, partly. He goes, you know about my grandfather? What do you know about my grandfather? And I said, well, that he took on the Ku Klux Klan. He goes, yeah, do you know that he was the first person from his high school to go to college? And he got up to the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill with $112 in his pocket and said, I'm a pretty good writer. I'd like to go to school here, but I don't have very much money. And they said, we've seen people do it with less, but you're going to have to get a job. So they got him a job on the Daily Tar Heel staff. And ultimately, he became the editor. And his dream became to own his own newspaper. So he answered an ad that had been put in the Daily Tar Heel by the Chamber of Commerce down in Tabor City, this little tiny town on the border of South Carolina. And he went down there and in 1946 started the Tabor City Tribune. Well, he's down there for a couple of years and realizes that the Ku Klux Klan is terrorizing that community. So he took him on, started reporting on him, writing editorials. It starts to create real problems for him. Cross burnings, kidnapping threats, death threats. They burned the headlights through the front of his window of his house at night. Everybody he knew told him to stop. And Horace was a real God and country, power of the pen kind of guy, and he didn't stop. And ultimately, the FBI got wind of what was going on. They infiltrated the Klan. And in the end, they arrested 300 Klansmen, put 62 in prison, including the Grand Dragon. And they broke the back of the Klan in that part. The Carolinas Ku Klux Klan was never the same. And I was saying earlier, in 1952, he won the Pulitzer Prize for meritorious public service, the first time a weekly newspaper had ever gotten that honor, and he was 32 years old. And he goes, you know about my grandfather? I said, yes, I do, actually. And I have obviously come to learn a lot more about his grandfather over the last 4 years. But he said, we made a documentary about him that Morgan Freeman narrated, and he handed me a thumb drive. And he goes, here, if you want to know more about him. And I said, so it's about your grandfather. I said, but it's also, you want a stable, projectable market to sell into. He goes, I hadn't thought about that. But yeah, he goes, I just think it's the right thing to do. So we're sitting there. And I mentioned that I had just gotten a surfboard the week before, and he pulls out his phone and he says, what do you think of this? And it's a photo of the prototype of this surfboard shipping system. And I said, so that's curbside recyclable? And he said, yes, it is. And I said, well, man, if my surfboard showed up like that, I'd be really happy. Well, I didn't know it at the time, but Darren always had a camera rolling, and he caught that soundbite. And that afternoon, he posted something on Instagram with me saying that. And that evening, I got an email from the CEO at the largest surfboard company in the world, Firewire Surfboards, going, hey, Meek, what's the deal with this clandestine surfboard shipping system? I'm like, wow, that was fast. So I put him in touch with Wes. And over the course of that summer, we just got to talking more and more and more. And I ended up joining November 1st of 2021 and have been doing that ever since. So that's the story.
That's a long story, but I love it. No, that was great. I mean, it's such a cool example of, one, just chasing a career, right? Like that journey and just saying yes to things and, and rolling with it. But that fortune of just meeting the right people in the right place. In those 4 years,
Mm-hmm.
3.5, 4 years since you joined,
Yeah.
what have you been developing and spinning up? I know like there's a film here,
Yeah.
and that path, but what are you building?
When we were talking earlier, we had a brief conversation about this idea that we have 4 audiences. So to clarify this, it's called a New Earth Project. And a New Earth Project started life as this initiative to reinvent a surfboard shipping system and make a short film to document that. That's all we thought it was.
Cool.
And I thought it was a project. I didn't think it was going to turn into what it's turned into. But as we got going, it became very clear that sustainability, particularly in packaging, was going to be one of the most disruptive and most meaningful business opportunities in packaging in the last 50 years. Because you have these twin forces at work. You have consumer demand. Consumers really want brands to do better. And you have legislation, whether it's in Europe, which is far ahead of the US, or it's on the individual state-by-state basis here in the United States, adopting these policy programs called extended producer responsibility, or EPR. You'd be familiar with it. They exist already in paint and electronics and mattresses and tires. Well, now states are beginning to pass EPR legislation to address the problem of single-use plastic packaging. And so you've got these twin forces at work. And so the more I got into it and the more I started to get exposed to what was happening, it was a content strategy to help tell the stories of the people and the brands that are helping to drive these transitions, with the hope of inspiring the greater supply chain to pay attention and to embrace these solutions. And as things have evolved, I kind of mark our progress by how New Earth is perceived and received at our sales meeting each year. In the first year, no one really knew what we were doing. Second year, a little bit more. Third year, people were starting to pay a little bit more attention. And this year in April, it was pretty extraordinary, because what's happened is a New Earth Project, which was started as this very small initiative, has evolved to become what we think of as the values communication framework for the whole of Atlantic Packaging. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we're developing a new grammar of value for purpose-driven business. And we're very fortunate to be in the packaging business because packaging touches everything. And it's a very visible representation of a brand's ethics and their commitments. And so, with this as the backdrop, we've been able to actually accelerate our storytelling. So we kind of have more of a slate approach to it now, where we've got films that we're creating. We've got short form content that we're creating. We have a couple of series that are in development that we are pitching to the usual suspects. And then we have one that you wouldn't think had any application at all to packaging at all. None, zero, except it really, I think, speaks volumes about this new grammar of value that we're talking about, where John Rose, who's an incredibly accomplished guy, he created Waves for Water and was working around the world in disaster and giving water filters, helping to bring fresh water to some of the most devastated places in the world. And when the earthquake happened in Haiti, I mean, you could equate him to Jose Andres.
Yeah.
Really. So Jose's bringing food, John's bringing water.
Gotcha.
But for 15 years, John did this, and he woke up one day and he was suffering from a complete identity crisis and from the most extreme PTSD that you can even imagine, because he had been putting himself into those places. And so for the last couple of years, John has been on a journey to go discover the healing modalities of indigenous people all over the world.
Oh, cool.
And so the series is called Unpacking. and we're in the middle of it right now, and John fronts that. And so we are going to be bringing that to the world in 2026. A New Earth Project presents Unpacking with John Rose, and it's really about this new grammar of value that we are talking about. And so making a surf movie is a very unlikely thing to do.
Yeah.
But it is part of our ethos and the foundational architecture of our brand. And so, yeah, we're not sure if it's going to work, but it's been working. So we're going to keep doing it.
I think the constant conversation in this world is always, we talked a little bit about it earlier, distribution.
Yeah.
How do you get eyeballs on things? What eyeballs do you want to get on things? From a New Earth Project's perspectives, how are you defining success? Like, what feels like a win in this sort of diversity and slate of projects you're pursuing?
When you have Yeti call you, you've never done business with Yeti before, and they get in touch with Wes. So sorry, I never did tell you this. So it's the Carter family business. It went from Horace to Rusty, his son. So in 1971, I got to fill this in. Horace threw the keys to the business across the table to his son Rusty and said, "I'm going fishing," because Horace always thought of himself as a writer.
Right.
So we moved to Central Florida to go freshwater fishing and write about it, books and magazine articles. And Rusty's the guy that took the business from about $1 million a year in sales to today over $1 billion a year in sales. And it's Rusty and Wes that own the company. And Wes is the third generation of the Carter family to own and run the business. And so that's how we arrived here. And there could be a whole documentary series on Rusty Carter. He's one of the great entrepreneurs of the 20th century. So there's that family legacy. And so how do we define success? When you get a call from the person who runs the sustainable packaging business at Yeti, who says, "My boss told me I'm supposed to get in touch with you guys because what you're doing is really making a difference." That's a success metric that I don't know how you build an attribution model for that, but that's a signal right there that what we've been doing is working.
As you look at what a New Earth Project is, what it has become, what do you see as the future for it?
It's a really good question. We are we're in the middle of it now, really engaging in a journey to synthesize. So Atlantic Packaging is the engine that makes this whole thing go.
Yeah.
And then a New Earth Project is, again, this values communication framework. And so we think we have 5 pillars. So maybe where we're going, I'll answer it this way. We have that wellness program that is extraordinary. So that's one of the pillars. So we communicate to our internal audience, but also to our external audience. We will be announcing soon the launch of New Earth Ventures, which is our corporate venture fund that is run by Matt Saunders. And that's all about investing in new materials and technology with an application in the packaging supply chain. Mm-hmm. We're very philanthropic as an organization. And so we have a lot of conservation organizations that we support. And so conservation and the stories of the people and the organizations that we support are stories that we tell. We have a corporate sustainability program where we have a sustainability strategy that's run by Carolyn Deloach. And so we're members of the CDP, which was the Carbon Disclosure Project. It's now called CDP. We have a score of an A. We have a science-based target. We've electrified our forklift fleet. We're transitioning to real renewable energy. So whether it's solar panels on our warehouses or it's creating virtual power purchasing agreements with other packaging companies. Zero waste program for all of our facilities. And so that's corporate sustainability for us, but then we help our customers as well. And then New Earth approved packaging solutions for a healthy planet. These were all spinning out, kind of orbiting on their own. And over the last 6 or 8 months, we've been able to bring them into, again, this framework called the New Earth Project. And so we're in this journey to synthesize a New Earth Project with Atlantic, and the way it's feeling right now, and this could change, but it's feeling like a New Earth Project powered by Atlantic Packaging. Because without a healthy, profitable, and we're proudly for profit, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
But without a healthy, profitable Atlantic, we can't do any of this other stuff. But in doing this other stuff, it's starting to create this flywheel effect where people are like, I want to work with those guys. They have the same values that I have. We believe the same thing that you believe. And we think that industry is the most powerful force in the world to drive these changes. We also think that an unfair burden has been placed on individuals. It starts with trying to calculate your individual carbon footprint.
Yeah. How many Earths?
Oh my God. And then, you know, you could do 1 million beach cleanups a year and you're not going to solve the problem until you stop the problem up in the system. And so what we're really focused on is how can we help the system transition to more circular, regenerative practices within packaging. And then I think we have a larger vision for this whole thing as well. So I'm not sure if you've ever heard of Daniel Schmachtenberger and some of the work that he has done around what he calls the meta crisis. I think Daniel, he's a fascinating sense maker. He's one of the smartest people I've ever met. I think he's a generational, brilliant guy. And he talks about the meta crisis, this collection of global catastrophic risks that we are dealing with. You know, we've always had risk, fire, flood, famine, but they've always largely been local.
Yeah.
Since 1945 is the first time that we've ever really had a global and now we have them. We've had one: pandemic, synthetic biology, the rise of AI, nuclear energy. So the meta crisis exists. Well, the global plastic pollution crisis is one of those global catastrophic risks.
Yeah.
That's one that we actually have the technology today to fix it. It's also super visible. Like synthetic biology, nobody can't see it, but you can see the packaging problem.
Yeah.
So what we're hopeful is that we're at the beginning stages of enabling the systems, the processes, the materials to address the problem. And that as we do that and as we have success, we'll start to build momentum and it will be very visible. So it's going to be one of those things that as you solve the problem, it becomes less visible and it starts to go away and you start to see, hey, there's not as much plastic on the beach as there used to be. Brands are coming. I'm seeing brands at the store that have a much better packaging profile. I really like this. This is really good. So it becomes this virtuous cycle. And if we can do it for that, what are the other ones that we can tackle? And so what we're hoping is that it presents a positive signal to other folks working on hard problems. Just keep at it. You can do it too.
I love it. Okay, before I let you go, I've got my 5 not so rapid fire questions.
I'm ready.
And this one you sort of already answered in your experience in meeting Atlantic Packaging, but I'm curious to see where you go.
Yeah.
What's a story that had an impact on your life and why?
A story that had an impact on my life and why?
And it could be in any medium.
Well, I'm reading Simon Critchley's book, Mysticism, right now.
Okay.
It's one of the most challenging books I've ever read, but it's meeting me where I am. It is changing my life in real time. I always said I wanted to have a rigorous academic experience because I was a total fuck up in college. And I'm having that rigorous academic experience right now. It takes 2 other books and ChatGPT and a dictionary to read this book. And I'm getting through it. And it has changed my life in many ways up to this point. So I would say that.
Oh, that's very cool. I'm going to bug you more about that later.
Yeah, dude.
What's one film you think everyone should watch?
One film everyone should watch. Let's come back to that one.
Okay, we're coming back. What's something you never leave home without?
Something I never leave home without? My journal.
I love it.
Yeah.
Paper and
Yes,
pen, classic.
paper, yes, paper and pen. Moleskine, paper and pen.
Nice.
Yes.
What's an important place for you to go to find inspiration?
Nature. Yeah.
I'm guessing the
The
beach
the o-
specifically for you.
The ocean. Yeah. When my wife and I first started going out, I said beach or ocean. She said ocean. I said beach or mountains, and she said I prefer the beach. I'm like, I do too. I think that's a good question to ask each other. Yeah. Yeah. The ocean.
What's an important skill for all storytellers to develop?
Empathy. Curiosity and empathy. Yeah. You have to be curious. You have to be like super curious, super empathetic, and you need to come at it as a solutionist, somebody who's bringing solutions to the table. Yeah.
I love it. Okay, back to the first one.
Are we coming back to the film?
Yeah. What's one film you think everyone should watch?
Star Wars.
Star Wars. Original trilogy?
The first one.
First one.
Yeah.
Love it.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
May the force be with you.
Thanks so much, Don.
Thanks. Great to meet you.
Yeah.
Yeah.